Well, we continue now. The University of Johannesburg Prize for South African Writing, or UJ Prize, has announced its winners for both the debut and main prize category, showcasing the rich talent within South African literature at large. Jared Thompson has been awarded the debut prize for his novel, The Institute for Creative Dying. The main prize has been awarded to Morabo Morojele for his book, Three-Egg Dilemma. Now, both authors are recognized for their significant contributions to South African literature and the ability to engage readers through innovative storytelling and compelling themes. And this morning, both of them join us to chat a little bit further. Jared Thompson and Morabo Morojele, good morning to the both of you, and thank you for joining us at this hour.
Good morning.
Jared?
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure to have both of you. Jared, I want to start off with you at this point, sparking getting the inspiration and perhaps looking at what sparked the idea for the Institute for Creative Dying. What went into that feat, and also congratulations as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your congratulations. The book started off as my own spiritual journey. I grew up Catholic, and I kind of lost my faith along the way, and it was kind of me searching for new systems of belief, new imagery and symbols that I could just understand this existential dilemma that we're living. I went in search of Hindu philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, and along the way stumbled along thinkers like Ram Dass and Alan Watts, and that's where, listening to those thinkers, that's when the idea of the book started to emerge for me, as a way to kind of just turn into story my own life experience with faith and thinking about these existential problems, and then kind of putting it into a South African setting with characters that I found were interesting in the things that they were dealing with, and which also resonated with my own life.
Well, speaking of which, approaching character development through your debut novel as well. I mean, what went into that for you? How do you also think that your novel challenges conventional narratives within literature at large?
In terms of character development, it's a lot of asking yourself as an author, what interests me, what do I want to write about, what issues do I want to address that I see around me in my everyday life, and then how do I get the textures of characters from different walks of life. So each of the characters, there's an ex-convict, there's a former nun, there's a former model, there's a postgraduate student, and then there's an athlete. So I wanted to take characters from vast different walks of life, and then really taking the time to research, what is it like for a model, for example? What is the modeling industry like? What issues do they experience? And really trying to hone down, especially in terms of a book, hone down the language, right? How does someone from this walk of life speak, act, think? And through that, through the textures of their life, having the issue of mortality and death, having them face that kind of lets them come to their own kind of point of view on how they negotiate mortality and what kind of reconciliation they come to at the end, at least, of the book. And in terms of challenging literature, I just wanted to write a story that I had never read in South African literature before.
Yes.
I think I always try to focus on what story hasn't been told, what story do I want to tell. Toni Morrison always says, like, if there's a story that you want to tell and you haven't seen it in and around your reading life, write it yourself.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to do, really. Yeah.
Well, Jared, thank you for being part of, the voices that shape the literary landscape as well. Because from Jared, and I want to bring in Morabo. Again, Morabo, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Congrats on winning the main UJ Prize. Perhaps you could speak to the motivation behind your offering, the need to blend humor with social critique in Three-Egg Dilemma.
Thank you very much for that. I was just listening to Jared and wondering why a young man such as he is dealing with mortality. But then, of course, life it is. Mortality is not, or death, it's not reserved for the old. In fact, across, we all know people who've passed away at all ages, and therefore perhaps saying that is not right. What motivated me? I'm motivated by several things. One, social collapse. And I look, for example, at what is and in this book, there's a lot of story. The story is essentially about a community of people who live through collapse of society, violence, military interventions, and so on and so forth. And looking at Gaza at the moment, it's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my whole life. My book talks about a similar kind of thing, but in a very small, much smaller scale. Horrific. So that's one part of the sense that it's about life and its horrors and so on. But at the same time, it's also about community solidarity, about human solidarity. The fact that
Morabo, let me come in there, because I actually want to look at some of your own experiences, perhaps how it would have influenced the development of characters, and perhaps also the title, the significance of it in relation to the themes that you're exploring as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the title, there's a very famous theory or called the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is about choices that two prisoners who've been arrested but are separated, are interrogated, and are interrogated by the police, and I asked, what about the crime, right? And there's a whole dilemma there, and it resulted in, it's one of the explanations, for example, of something called game theory, which is mathematics and stuff I don't really understand, right? But yeah, it's very complex stuff. But in this case, it's very simply put, 3 eggs. If you live on 2 eggs a day, every day, and a bit of starch and maybe some vegetables, and then on one day you've got a 6-pack of eggs, you eat 2 on the first day. On the second day, you drop 1, and you try and save it, but you can't, so you're left with 3. Now, what is your dilemma? Do you eat all 3? Do you eat 2 as usual and leave 1 for the next day? Do you eat 1 and leave 2 for the next day? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the question about optimism, faith, hope, or you know what? We live once, so let's live once, as it were. And so the whole book, a part of the book is really about choices that people make. What are the choices that we make, and what are their consequences?
Perhaps also just this recognition for the both of you. Jared, let me bring you back into the conversation. I mean, what does this do for your confidence in writing, but also perhaps your future endeavors? Morabo, the same breath, this recognition for you, what does it mean for you going forward as well? Jared, let's start with you, and then I'll end up with Morabo.
I think every artist is always plagued with self-doubt, and I think the doubt never goes away, and that the doubt is actually a helpful companion because it keeps you humble. But I think having like this kind of recognition kind of evens out the sharp edges of the doubt, if that makes sense. Kind of makes the doubt more of like a friend that you can use and less of like an enemy that keeps you from writing. So yeah, I'd say that it makes it more amenable to sitting with your doubt and writing through that, yeah.
All right, Jared, thanks for that. Morabo, in conclusion, what about you? What does this mean for you, and perhaps also going forward, what else can we expect?
For me, it's great because, we make choices in life, as 3X dilemma. We make choices. And I, for example, decided I didn't want to be despite my education, thankfully, which I have received, I decided I didn't want to be an employed person in some corporate or some organization. And therefore, I took all these risks. And therefore, for me, the award is gratification. It's a reward for the risk that I've taken. Going forward, though, I've been very fortunate in the recent past. I was part of a group of people who participated in the annual Kane Prize for African Writing retreat on the balmy shores of Lake Malawi in July. The Kane Prize is considered probably the most prestigious prize for African short story writing.
Yes.
The anthology, the annual anthology in which my story and the stories of others will be published in October. And that's just great. I mean, it's now, international. It's now,
Yes.
I'm now in Britain. And as much as I love South Africa, Lesotho, my place of birth and Africa as a whole, but it's great to, in a sense, get out there,
Yes. Well, Morabo and Jared, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us at the SABC. Congrats on this feat, and thank you for being part of our heritage storytelling, and of course, just reflecting our voices as a nation, adding to that agency at large for us. We're chatting to UJ Prize winners, authors Jared Thompson and Morabo Morojele this morning, as well as the offerings through the prizes that they won through that UJ Art Prize.